Hello and welcome to the Press Room with WCN-TV, where we dive deeper into topics from recent editions of the Wilson County News. The Press Room is brought to you by the Wilson County News, your source for community and communication. I'm your host, Julia, the Marketing and Social Media Specialist here at the Wilson County News. Today's episode is sponsored by the Go Wilson Community app. In the Go Wilson app, you can access the La Vernia News, Wilson County News, Go Wilson 360 Community Calendar, City of Floresville resources, burn ban information, news videos, audio articles, and more. Download the app at gowilsonapp.com for Apple and Android devices, and stay up to date on your community. Everything we're talking about today has appeared in recent editions of the Wilson County News. We're covering the following topic. The late Dr. Ella Ware of Stockdale had a Texas state historical marker dedicated to her on May 13th. Learn about her significance in Wilson County's history and about the Wilson County Historical Society and the Wilson County Historical Commission's work and involvement in this dedication from Wilson County Historical Society and Commission member Anthony Delgado. You can subscribe to print, digital, or both editions of the Wilson County News at wilsoncountynews.com/subscribe. So you never miss an edition of your local newspaper. Feel free to follow us where you're watching today so you're always up to date on the Press Room and our other WCN TV news. Let's meet Anthony Delgado. He's an active and contributing member of the Wilson County Historical Society and the Wilson County Historical Commission. They recently hosted a Texas State Historical Marker dedication to Stockdale's late Dr. Ella Ware. Let's learn who Dr. Ware was and why her life and work in Wilson County is deserving of an historical marker. You'll also learn more about the process of implementing historical markers and more about what the Wilson County Historical Society and the Wilson County Historical Commission do. Welcome to the Press Room.
Thank you. Appreciate it.
Yeah, we're glad to have you on. So who are you and where are you from?
Sure, thanks, Julia. So I'm Anthony Delgado, and I'm originally from San Antonio. I was in the Air Force for about 24 years. So I went back and forth from San Antonio to other places, eventually come back here in 1997 and settle in the northern part of Wilson County.
Okay.
So I've been around Wilson County for the past 25 years, although San Antonio is home for us.
Right, that's very cool. So that all being said, how did you become part of the Historical Society?
So history is not my thing, at least it hasn't been. I'm a business major. My undergrad and graduate degrees are in business.
Wow.
But I started doing family history research probably about maybe 12, 13 years ago. And I found where all of my dad's ancestors are from here. As a matter of fact, my son says, a little joke, he says, we've been in San Antonio for 300 years, and we've gone 20 miles. So that's we're a slow-moving family, right?
Yeah.
I started doing family history research and then come to learn that my dad's family has been here for hundreds of years. But more importantly, many of their homes and ranches were actually in Wilson County. I didn't know that at all when we moved here.
Yeah.
So I thought, what better way to learn about them and this place than to join the Wilson County Historical Society. So I've been with the society about maybe 6 or 7 years, so it hasn't been that long. The society's been around much longer, but I'm fairly a newbie.
That's very cool, though. And so as part of the Wilson County Historical Society now, what do you do with them?
So I am pretty active with them, helping out wherever I can. So I am part of their marker committee. So
Sure.
They have a focus on different aspects of history within the county. They've got a marker committee, and I am with the marker committee in helping to promote and preserve the markers throughout the county.
Very cool. All right. And so that lines up really well with what we're going to be talking about here today. So let's kind of get into that. First and foremost, who was Dr. Ella Ware and when and where was she born?
So Dr. Ella Ware, and I'm really glad that you're offering this opportunity to talk about her and her historical marker. We just installed it and unveiled it probably a week ago.
Yeah.
Dr. Ware is originally she was born in Gillette, but she was raised in Stockdale. It wasn't too long after her birth. I want to say she was born probably around 1870s time frame. In Gillette, they moved to Stockdale and Stockdale was her home. And so she's from Stockdale. She goes off, gets her medical degree, and then she returns. And so this historical marker that was dedicated to her in her life is really the story of a hometown girl who kind of does good for the community.
Right, yeah, and I can see that a lot in the story that was presented about her during the marker dedication, which I only got to read in the Wilson County News.
Oh,
but
unfortunate, yeah, because somebody probably had a graduation themselves, right?
Yes,
yeah.
I was a little busy that weekend. And so you mentioned that she went off to college. I understand she attended UT Medical College in Galveston.
Right.
That's quite a ways away from home, and I also understand that she was offered a position to teach there.
Correct.
So why would it be that Dr. Ware returns home to Stockdale after receiving her doctorate degree? You know, why not stay at the college to teach, work in a bigger city with more resources?
So my knowledge of Dr. Ware has to do with much of the information that was presented for the historical marker.
Sure.
The person who really can talk a lot and very in-depth about Dr. Ware is one of the Wilson County Historical Commission members, Cassie Dixon, who also is the director of the Stockdale Museum.
Yeah.
She can tell you, she could probably talk all day about Dr. Ware. But from what I understand, and listening to Cassie talk last week at the dedication, the answer to the question about why did she come back to Stockdale and not stay as a professor in Galveston talks to the character of who Dr. Ware was. She was about serving the community. It wasn't about herself, because being a professor is very prestigious, especially in the late 1800s, early 1900s.
And as a woman.
And as a woman, professor on top of that, right? So she kind of took this other. I would call it an acclaim. She probably wouldn't. She probably downplayed it. But she's the second woman graduate of medical school in the state of Texas.
Wow.
From UTMB in Galveston. So she's the second female doctor in the state of Texas. She's ranked third among 40 students at the medical school that she went to when she graduated in 1899. So she really knew her stuff.
Yeah.
But again, it goes back to her character. She is one about giving to the community. And so she comes back home to Stockdale, which is where she's from. She knew that there were no other trained, licensed doctors in the community. And so she comes back with her education. She continues her education, and she continues to serve her community.
Wow. And that, like you said, no other trained, licensed doctors in the
Correct.
area.
Right.
That makes her an extremely important individual to her community.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Right. And not that anybody at the time cared. That's one of the other things I learned in reading the documentation that Cassie put together. Nobody really cared the fact that she was a woman doctor, right? She was the doctor.
Exactly.
And the fact that she was a woman was kind of over, in my opinion, it was kind of over. Who cares, right? When I have somebody in my family that needs care, I'm going to go see Dr. Ware.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. And so after returning to Stockdale, how long did Dr. Ware serve as a doctor?
So she serves as a doctor in Stockdale the remaining part of her life. So she comes back after graduating in 1899 from Galveston. She comes back to Stockdale, and she serves more than 50 years as the town's doctor.
Dang, that is a long and probably healthy career.
Right, yeah. 5 decades.
Yeah. Wow. And so over those 5 decades, I remember from our write-up in the Wilson County News that she was said to have delivered over 6,000 babies.
That's the research that Cassie put together, right? And so that's something, 6,000 babies. And at the dedication last week, 5 of those babies were there.
Aww.
And that was really cool.
That is
to
so
see.
Cool.
They're probably late 80s, early 90s as far as age goes.
Yeah.
But they're standing there proudly articulating the fact that they were delivered by Dr. Ware.
And that is a fact
that's
to
really
be
cool.
very proud of.
Yeah.
And a little tidbit to throw out there, I recently found out that my grandfather was delivered by Dr.
Really?
Yeah.
Oh my goodness.
So it's like, wow, Wow, small world, but really not, because from what I understand, she was traveling around the county, not just
That's right.
in Stockdale.
That's right.
To provide medical assistance.
There were Ware babies, and so even if their fathers or their uncles, there were family members that were at the dedication talking about others that were delivered by Dr. Ware, and one of the folks that were present talked about the family story of how Dr. Ware came from Stockdale and went to Lavernia to deliver one of the family members. So yeah, you're right. She didn't just stay in her community. She went anywhere that her needs, anywhere that the needs were being met is where she went. Yeah,
that's pretty amazing. And speaking of meeting needs, I also understand that she didn't always charge for her services.
Yeah, that was another story that was shared at the dedication. How it was kind of a barter system, right? So
sure.
Maybe the person who she's caring for medically was a seamstress.
Sure.
And so maybe she would provide Dr. Ware with a handmade dress, or maybe they were a baker, and they would deliver to Dr. Ware some baked goods.
Right.
One of the things that was interesting that was also displayed and discussed at the dedication was a wine jug that was found underneath the floorboards of Dr. Ware's old home. So one of the families that was present acquired her home probably in the 1940s.
Wow.
It's still property that the family has. And when they were going through the house, doing some renovations and so forth, they had unearthed the floorboards, and underneath the floor was a jug of wine. So undoubtedly, somebody presented Dr. Ware with a jug of wine, as payment for medical services.
That is quite interesting. And so, now that we've talked some of the more fun facts about Dr. Ella Ware, which hopefully we'll be able to go into more detail with Cassie in the future, let's talk about some of the technical issues. You being part of you said it's the Marker Committee?
Marker Committee in the Society,
yes.
But I'm also part of the Historical Commission for the county. So two different entities. And I working with the County Historical Commission on their markers as well.
Oh, okay. So that makes sense. You were kind of not just a historical marker, maker, if you would, but you're the liaison for the folks that are doing a lot of groundwork in the society.
That's
to
right.
relate back to the commission.
That's correct.
Which then communicates with the state.
That's correct.
From how I understand.
Yeah, you got it all right.
Cool. And so, that all said, I assume there are some certain requirements that locations, people, or even notable events must meet to merit an historical marker. So, what are those requirements?
Sure. So, the Texas Historical Commission puts out guidelines on historical markers. So, historical markers, as you well said, could be about people, they could be about a location, or they could be about an event. For the most part, to be considered historical, the person, the place, the event should have happened at least 50 years ago, if not more.
Sure.
But so there's so anything newer than 50 is kind of considered modern history as opposed to history, right, or current events. So for the Texas Historical Commission, it's 50 years.
Right.
So anything older than 50 years is considered historical. If we're talking about a person, persons cannot be living, and if they're deceased, they must have died at least 10 years ago.
Right.
So there's a lot of rules regarding privacy and so forth. So to avoid any conflicts, legal or otherwise, the Texas Historical Commission kind of sets out those guidelines.
Right.
And so they go another step further, and they have different categories of historical markers. So they have what's called a subject marker. So the subject could be a person, place, or an event.
Right.
They also have another marker that they share, and it's called undertold stories, right? So undertold markers. So this is a category, and they've published their categories. It's about 30 categories of people, places, events, demographics of the folks in Texas that whose stories are kind of undertold.
Right.
So on this list, you would find First Peoples, Native Americans, Indigenous people. You would find women's history.
Yes.
You'll find Native American history. You'll find Mexican American history,
Wow.
African American history,
Yeah.
information about sciences. So there is probably, like I said, probably about 30 subjects that are on this list that the Texas Historical Commission is seeking input on during their window. They'll announce later in the year their undertold markers. And so if you have a person, place, or event in Wilson County that's got something related to those categories, then those would be ideal candidates for undertold markers. Now, why is that different than the subject markers? Well, a couple of things. One, a subject marker, there's a cost because those markers are pretty heavy duty, right?
Right.
They're meant to last literally a lifetime for generations.
Yes.
And currently, the state for the subject markers, it's $2,300 for the marker and a $100 application fee. For undertold markers, all of that cost is waived.
Nice.
The state uses those application fees, and they kind of build this pot, and then they put out this call for undertold stories. Last year, we dedicated a marker in Poth to Minnie Washington Yates.
Yeah.
And that was a marker that was approved by the state under their undertold marker program.
Wow. And
So-
how nice that that's cost-free, because the point of telling undertold stories is to make history more accessible.
Absolutely correct. Yes.
That is so cool.
Yeah. So that's the markers, and so the state through the Texas Historical Commission puts out that call, and then our Wilson County Historical Commission will then take that and then share with what I call our partners in historic preservation. So the Wilson County Historical Society, Lavernia Historical Association, Stockdale Museum, Sutherland Springs will work with those agencies and societies to get the word out and drum up some requests to put marker applications together.
Right.
It's a pretty competitive space. So when we submit an application to the state, it competes with the 254 counties across the state.
Wow.
They have a scoring system, and they look to see, how historic is this person, place, or event.
Right.
Does it fit one of these categories of history that's not well known?
Sure.
So they have a scoring system, and then those get scored. They'll get approved, and then there's about a 24 to 36 month process from the time that it's approved until the marker is actually received.
Right.
So Dr. Ware is a perfect example. That's a 2020 application that was approved,
Oh my gosh.
and we installed it in 2023. It was received. This is May, so it was received February of 2023. It was approved in 2020.
That's crazy.
That is crazy, but that's just kind of the landscape that we're dealing with.
Sure. And so, well, speaking of that landscape, what steps did the Wilson County Historical Society and the Wilson County Historical Commission take to make Dr. Ella Ware's historical marker possible?
Right. So we put up that call several years ago. The Stockdale Museum answered that call and said, we've got an ideal candidate for a marker. And so we work with individuals and societies to put together the nomination package, the application for the marker. So the Historical Society, I mentioned I'm a member of the marker committee.
Right.
So we will work with in this case it was the Stockdale Museum and Cassie Dixon and others to put this package together, review the package, make sure it's got all the I's dotted and all the T's crossed. We then pass that to the commission, who's responsible in doing those collections. The commission has the responsibility of making sure that all their THC requirements are met. And then the historical commission sends that off to THC, and then we wait with bated breath for the approval.
Yeah.
And so in this case, it was approved. And then we work back and forth with THC. They'll take that, and then they come up. There's a 10-page narrative that has to accompany the application. And so this 10-page narrative on Dr. Ware talks about Dr. Ware, her significance in the community, talks about her history. And so THC will then take that information, and then they'll create a narrative for the marker. And then we go back and forth with THC on did they capture the information correctly? Oops.
Right, because
We
there's
said-
a lot less room than 10 pages on an historical marker.
Yes, ma'am. 27 by 42.
Wow.
Yeah, so that's what we get for a historical marker. Maybe this isn't the case, but what would happen is, say for instance, instead of Stockdale, we put Sutherland Springs. Oh, no, we didn't mean to say Sutherland. We meant to say Stockdale. So
Right.
that's the kind of the back and forth that we would work with the Texas Historical Commission on the language. They approve it. It then goes to the foundry. The foundry then they take that text and then they create this marker. Then they mail it off, and so that's that 3-year period of waiting for approvals and then the back and forth.
Wow. That's a lot of work.
Yes, and so that's what the society, the Lavernia Historical Association, Stockdale, Sutherland Springs, that's what they're going to be doing with people in the community in pulling those applications together.
Okay, cool. And do you have like a month estimated for when that call will open up?
Sure. So for the subject markers, this is the non-undertold, right? So this is the one that you're going to pay for. They typically will announce that being THC. They will announce the markers will open up March 1st, and that application window would close May 16th. So we've just closed out the marker applications for this year. We did submit an application for Rancho Pataguilla. Rancho Pataguilla. So Rancho Pataguilla is one of 3 mission-based ranchos that was based here in Wilson County.
Okay.
So we're familiar with Rancho de las Cabras,
Yes.
right? And so that was belonged to Mission Espada. Rancho Pataguilla was northern part of today's Floresville, up like near Helton Park.
Okay.
It went down south. So we came into, if you're familiar with the markers where Lodi Ferry is and the De La Cerda Cemetery, that area was part of the historic Rancho Pataguilla.
Wow.
And so so we've submitted an application, keeping our fingers crossed. This is May, so the application window has now closed. We'll probably hear maybe September, October timeframe whether or not we were approved. And so that would begin the cycle until we actually get the marker 2.5 years from now.
Right.
And then I just left a meeting where we're working on, me and several others in the society are working on an application, or rather the details associated with the other rancho, which was Rancho Paisle. So here in Wilson County, we have 3 of the 5 ranchos that were mission-based. And unfortunately, not a lot of people know that. So that's one of the things that we on the Historical Society and we, the Historical Commission, are going to be working on in capturing that history and then sharing that history out. And it's wonderful folks like yourselves at the Wilson County News that's going to help us get those stories out.
Yes, absolutely. And we are looking forward to more information as y'all get it and as y'all progress with those markers.
Excellent.
Yeah. And so, speaking of all of these things that y'all are working on the historical marker side, what else is going on at the Wilson County Historical Society?
Wilson County Historical Society is doing lots. So thanks to you and all of the things that you're doing to help promote that. Not too long ago, you hosted Neela Hopkins.
Yes.
And she's talking about the bricks that she's selling. And the bricks are for the Jailhouse. So the Jailhouse Museum is a project that the Wilson County Historical Society is working on. So they're renovating the historic jailhouse, making that kind of bringing it up to date and taking care of some of the issues that the building had with leaks and walls falling down. So they've got that renovated, done beautifully. It's now open for tours. So there's jailhouse tours that the society is hosting. The monthly Floresville Opry helps raise funds to go towards the museum renovations. So that's happening. The society, through Viola Hankey and her team of folks, they hold a Floresville Opry every month. And then she is also the brainchild for a wonderfully successful shindig that happened in April. Yeah. And so she's working to have another shindig in July. So it's the July shindig.
Yes.
It's a real technical, formal term that she's applied to this. She wanted to make sure that folks understood it's not the Opry. It's bigger. And so that's going to be held in the Floresville Event Center, July the 15th. So another thing that the society is working on.
And all of those so far are benefiting the Jailhouse Museum.
Yes.
Which is underway, but open for tours.
Yes, it is. The renovations are currently ongoing. We've finished the bottom floor and the residence areas.
Wow.
So the first floor and second floor residence areas are done. The dining room has been, the dining room and kitchen renovations. The floor is done. They're just actually going in now, installing the old sink, putting up some cabinets. They've done the downstairs. They call it the Sally Port. So this is the entrance from the back where the sheriff would have brought the prisoners in.
Sure.
And then there's a metal staircase that goes up to the cells. So the cells on the second and the third floor are what they're working on now. So that's where we still need about $100, from what I think I remember correctly, about $150,000 to raise so that we can get up there and do some restoration work on the cells.
Yes, and that's exciting because the cells
It
are
is.
one of the main reasons to go see the museum.
It is fascinating.
Yeah, I mean,
one of the things that Tara Lee is in the society. She's kind of the director, organizing, managing the Jailhouse Museum and its renovation projects. She's also a member of several local paranormal societies.
yeah.
So she has started hosting paranormal tours. If you're interested in that kind of thing, I would highly suggest getting with Tara Lee and getting on her schedule for paranormal tours.
Absolutely. And I also understand that y'all are working with the El Camino Real de los Tejas on a June 3rd event.
So the Trail de Flores chapter of the El Camino Real de los Tejas National Historic Trail Association. Many of our members that are in the society are also members of the trail. So part of the other things about that's really cool about Wilson County is the old Camino Real went from San Antonio. They called it La Bahia Road. So the road that went from San Antonio to La Bahia, which is present-day Goliad.
Okay.
So the road went from San Antonio through Floresville, down through Poth, down to Goliad.
Wow.
And so that's the old historic Camino, the Royal Road from the Spanish colonial time period. So every first Saturday in June is National Trails Day. So among the national trails, any of the trails really, but more importantly, the National Historic Trails, they celebrate Trails Day the first Saturday of the month. So the local chapter, the Trail de Flores chapter, is hosting a National Trails Day event at historic, so at Helton Park, which sits on historic land grants here in Wilson County. So June the 3rd, from 9 to 3, the Trail de Flores chapter is hosting National Trails Day at Helton Park.
Very cool, and I assume that involves walking the trail.
It'll involve walking the trail. So the local chapter, the Trail de Flores chapter, petitioned the National Park Service, who's responsible for the historic trails throughout the nation. So the local chapter petitioned the National Park Service to add Helton Park and the trail that went through Helton Park, the old La Bahia Road, as part of the Camino. So it's called a retracement route.
Sure.
So we petitioned the National Park Service and said, hey, Helton Park sits on old historic land grants. Here is an old image of an 1840s map that shows the La Bahia Road going through the middle of present-day Helton Park. The National Park Service said, absolutely, you're absolutely correct. And so they approved us adding the trail through Helton Park as part of the old Camino Real. And so now when you go to Helton Park, you'll see the brown El Camino Real signs throughout the park.
Very cool.
Part of the Trails Day event is the 1 mile hike through the park. We've got 5 points of interest that we will be sharing with the hikers that talks about the history that happened there at Helton Park.
Very awesome. That's definitely something to look forward to.
I think so.
Yeah, and since we've also mentioned the Wilson County Historical Commission many times throughout this interview, what developments are they working on?
Sure. So the Historical Commission, unlike the Society, is a function of Wilson County government.
Okay.
So the Historical Commission chair responds to the direction of the county commissioners through the Wilson County judge. So it's really the county commissioners who give direction to the Historical Commission as to kind of what they want done.
Sure.
And so we're working right now to put together a couple of exhibits. One of them is an exhibit where we look at the Sanborn maps. Sanborn maps were a series of maps that were created really for insurance purposes in the early 1900s. And so online we can find from Floresville a Sanborn map from, I think it's 1902, 1905, and 1907.
Wow.
So one of the things that we're doing is we're looking at those old maps, looking at the buildings that are called out on these old maps, going to the archives, finding pictures of these old buildings, finding today's picture, and then creating an exhibit that has the Sanborn map and say the Wilson County News building.
Sure,
right?
yeah.
So we've got the old image of the building, today's image of the building on this 1902 map.
Wow.
So we're working to build an exhibit, and that's one of the things that we're working on.
Yeah.
Now, another thing Historical Commission is working on is because the Historical Commission is responsible for the markers,
Right.
I've just completed an assessment of the 67 markers that we have throughout the county.
Wow.
So this means going out and visiting each of the markers, assessing their condition. Some of them look brand new, even though they've been out in the elements for the past 10 years. Others, which we've had since probably maybe the 1960s, they're looking a bit faded. So we have
Sure.
about 5 or 6 markers that we're going to have to go out and refurbish. Not a difficult task, but it is something that we need to do. So we just completed the assessment, which was one of our goals for this year. So that's done. We also have a cemetery conservation plan. So the Texas Historical Commission puts out a framework of what cemetery preservation should look like for a county commissioner, a county historical commission. And so we've pulled together, we're beginning to pull together that conservation plan, identifying there's over 142 cemeteries in the county. Many of them are private. Some of them may only have 1 or 2 graves. There's a historic cemetery here in Floresville, just behind HEB, called the Walker Edwards Cemetery. It's a old historic African American cemetery that was used by the Walker Edwards family. And so that's one of the 142 that we're putting on our list of cemeteries. And then we're also going to do an assessment to determine how fragile are these cemeteries to destruction. So Walker Edwards is a perfect example. Recently, there's been some pedestrian traffic that kind of has gone through there. Unfortunately, they vandalized the cemetery. They've left trash. There's a shopping cart from HEB that's in the middle of the cemetery. So we're going through there. We've got several folks from the society. Nancy de la Cerda has pulled together a Friends of the Walker Edwards Cemetery. And so she's working really hard to help preserve the cemetery. And as a matter of fact, speaking of Nancy and the Walker Edwards Cemetery, this Saturday she's holding, along with the VFW and POTH, a Memorial Day service for Obie Walker. So Obie Walker is one of the family members from the Walker Edwards family. He is a World War I vet who's buried there. And so on Saturday, this Saturday coming up, May the 27th, at 1 o'clock in the afternoon, there'll be a Memorial Day service at the Walker Edwards Cemetery. So that's another thing that this commission is doing, is a cemetery preservation program.
Right.
Another thing that the commission is working on is researching and publishing the Texas Rangers of Wilson County. So there are about 40 to 45 Texas Rangers who were born, lived, or raised in Wilson County. And so one of our commission members, Nikki Storr, who's the director of the Wilson County Public Libraries, she has that as a research project that she's doing to go into the archives, dig up some information, create biographies, and then the plan is to put together a booklet of the biographical sketches of the Wilson County Rangers.
That is so cool. All right, and so it seems like y'all have so much going on. It seems like y'all really do have so much going on. So where can folks go for more information about, well, starting with today's first topic, Dr. Ella Ware and her historical marker, or the Wilson County Historical Society as y'all plan future events and initiatives, or the Wilson County Historical Commission as y'all push forward in your developments?
Sure, absolutely. So one of the really cool things is the Wilson County Historical Society's website. So the Wilson County Historical Society's website has tons of information. And that's a great resource if folks want to go and learn information about history within Wilson County.
Sure.
There's tons of articles relative to information throughout Wilson County, to include the things that we've talked about. The beauty of the historical markers is that the Texas Historical Commission has online information available and accessible to the public. So if you wanted to read the description of Dr. Ware's marker, you can go to the Texas Historical Commission's website and you can read that text.
Nice.
They also make available the background information. So as I mentioned earlier, every application has to have a 10-page document, a narrative, to accompany the application. Online, you can access that 10-page paragraph on Dr. Ware
Cool.
and any of the other 66 historical markers throughout the county.
Dang. Okay, so that's an amazing, very in-depth resource then.
It is, absolutely.
Right. And how about for keeping up with the Historical Commission?
So the Historical Commission, one of the things that I'm working on is creating a web page for the Historical Commission.
Sure.
So we have not had a place where we could go and access, say, the previous minutes of the Historical Commission. The Historical Commission is like the county government, has its meetings. It's an open public meeting.
Y'all have to follow
once a quarter.
Texas Public Information.
Yes, absolutely. So we have our meetings. They follow the Open Meetings Act, so they're open. Anybody from the public can attend the meetings. The agenda is posted on the Wilson County Courthouse.
Cool.
They have a bulletin board where we post it there. Once we get the website up and running, then we will be posting the agendas and the minutes on the website, along with other initiatives that we have going on.
All right. Well, that's good to know. We'll have to stay in touch about
Absolutely.
that. But again, thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you so much for having me.
That's all for today, folks. Thank you for tuning in to the Press Room with WCN-TV, brought to you by the Wilson County News. For more information about anything we mentioned in today's show, see the May 17th edition of the Wilson County News or visit wilsoncountynews.com. You can also find articles corresponding to each topic discussed today in this video's description. Thank you to the Go Wilson Community app for sponsoring today's episode. In the Go Wilson app, you can access the Livonia News, Wilson County News, Go Wilson 360 Community Calendar, City of Floresville resources, burn ban information, and more. You can even watch the Press Room from within the app. So, download the app at gowilsonapp.com, available for Apple and Android devices, and stay up to date on your community. Last but not least, we'd like to congratulate all area graduates of high school and college on their achievements. Congratulations, class of 2023. Remember to follow the Wilson County News where you're watching so you never miss an episode of the Press Room, and consider subscribing to receive the digital or print editions of the Wilson County News each week. You can find more news or subscribe at wilsoncountynews.com, or download our app, Go Wilson, to receive updates from our newsroom at your fingertips. The app is available for Apple and Android devices at gowilsonapp.com. We hope you'll tune in next week for another episode of the Press Room.